Right. I see the message from you here, Mark.
Oh yeah, it's rather late in the day, so it's neither here nor there. But there was some rather useful stuff that came out of the back of this one, which I think you may know of or may have.
I'm not looking at the screen.
Well, fine. It's a thing called a place.
I've refused to see what you're showing.
It's right. It's a thing called a place for everything, which was basically the premises about indexing and alphabetization. And so there are some the timeline thing has, it's a good reflection on the fact that, that though we think everything is done on effectively, letter sorts and string matching and thing now, that's comparatively modern notion. And there was a thing I really liked in it, which was the fact that at the Olympic Games, everyone marches around in alphabetical order. So, Albania comes before Bahrain, until we got to 1988 Olympics, when the Koreans said, well, we're going to do it in Korean. So I think Gabon came first, because in Korean alphabet, that's first. And it's a good reflection on this fact that just how deep some of these things sink. And we sort of tend to not to take them into account.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's absolutely fair enough. So I'm just looking at the emails. Adam sent an email. I have to reply to some of these other ones. Let me see here.
Yeah, I saw Adam's as well. And my one immediate reflection on looking at Adam's emails and looking at hypertext is there's an interesting sort of slight divergence I'm beginning to see in terms of people's understanding of what that means, because I think to probably the post-web generation, it's all about clicky text, where there are things you click in text. It's all about the links. They take you somewhere else, which is actually slightly divergent from sort of Ted's notion of non-linear text, where the links are an affordance of what you're doing rather than, as it were, the medium itself.
Yeah,
I know. I don't think the two are antithetical, but it's interesting. I've been sort of reflecting on that in recent days.
The separation between interactive text, in a sense, and hypertext, as in kind of the work.
The design, the actual thinking behind. In other words, why is it non-linear as opposed to the fact that it's just bits of text glued together with links?
Yeah, yeah. So that's one thing. Oh, hi, Brendan.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
How are we?
We are good. Just going through some messages from some of you and stuff. Yeah, we're good. I don't know if Alan will join us today. I think, I'm not sure about Raphael either, but we need to talk a bit about the publication and future of this stuff. I'm going to send a link here again. So this is the same link. I think I emailed you guys.
This is the Google Doc you sent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got it open.
So a couple of decisions we need to make, quite a few. First of all, Friday was okay, right? We survived.
Oh yeah, how was Saturday?
Saturday was also very nice, smaller group, but very much good involvement. But other than Mark, you guys were very quiet on Friday.
There was a whole lot going on in there. It was one of those things where that's almost like, all right, sit back, let these people talk it out. There were a few things that I added in the chat and such, but it was. I had a great time Friday.
I understand what Brendan's saying. There is a tendency to say this is all interesting. I'm going to sit and let it wash over me, and think, oh, there are some people I've heard of here. I shall see what they say. And a sort of temptation to self-edit.
There's also, I think, Adam, you've mentioned this before, but as the room balloons in size, naturally the pie kind of shrinks for each person in terms of talking time. And often there's like a queue of many bits of feedback that are already kind of waiting to be discussed. And you hear someone say something, you're like, oh, wow, I should really jump in on that. And there's 4 people with their hands up. So that is a challenge with regards to like larger group sizes.
But also that, and that is why I really prefer thematic meetings, is that if you stay on the theme, you're not going off topic or you're not derailing things. But if the topic is everything, then you really need to follow the flow of the conversation a bit more, because it's, yeah, I think to make it useful.
Agreed.
The irony here is, of course, subject is everything.
On that topic, Adam, actually both topic, Brendan and Adam. First of all, as an update, sorry, this thing jiggles. Oh yeah, this is really cool. Just to go, well, before I put it away. So this is a cool little thing, but it has two little balls on it. I want to tell you what they are, just really quickly. If the sun had the density of a black hole, it would be this size. This is iron. If you expanded this to the size of our planet, this is one iron molecule would be like. So that's how small the molecules are inside, and how many? 6 centimeters. I saw it on YouTube, managed to buy one online. Right. Okay, that was just making a noise. So as you saw in the emails, I think we have to decide on creating more stuff. I've decided that this community and our publications and our meetings is important enough for me to invest more time and effort into. So a couple of updates on that. Number one, Fridays and Saturdays meetings are being transcribed by a human, not machine. Oh, Alan is here. Are you coming without video, Alan?
I am about to attach video and my headphones.
We were waiting for you to be announced as you arrived.
There should be a puff of smoke at least. Yeah, I agree with Vince. Just not.
That explains how I feel quite a bit sometimes. Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, we just started talking about the main topic, kind of going forward. Where are you, by the way?
I am up north. I managed to take a couple days off work.
Where up north?
Up in Ithaca.
Oh, okay. Both Peter and I went to Syracuse, you know, so we do know the neighborhood.
Oh, I didn't realize.
Yeah, that's our neck. Right. Okay. So just to continue where we kind of had started here.
That's why I have a Syracuse orange tie.
Yes, you do, and it's beautiful. And one day we'll see you in video as well. Right. So, in terms of keeping the community thing happening, I want to invest more time and effort in the community because I think it's wonderful. So compared to my other efforts. Number two, Friday and Saturday's presentations are being human transcribed. So it's kind of expensive, but I decided for these 2 days it's worth it. For the record of how we go forward, 2 hours plus 2.5, I'm spending $350 on that. But I know the guy is good.
Wow.
Yeah, but he's really good, and it's going to go in the book.
Okay.
Obviously, that's a little bit too expensive for us to do for every single meeting. And the automatic transcription, as you guys know, it's the versions of Ismail and Vint are insane, right? It's just there doesn't seem to be any way to teach it. Like there's someone here called Ismail. Even if we introduce ourselves, it's awful. Anyway, that's a different thing.
So hey, quick interjection. Have you what tool are you using for transcription? I know
I
you
was
mentioned
using Descript.
Okay.
Otter is amazing.
Yeah, I could take a look at Otter. I have a pro subscription to that, and
Same here.
you can teach it names and words that now granted, I don't know how quality the performance is, but it should give us a boost with that. So it's not like a new word is being created each time.
Yeah, that's also like
from one of our
we both have paid.
Today's.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I've done it for other ones. I just haven't gone back and Otter's a great attempt. But Otter still has trouble. So another approach might be a little, you may like this, like it's a little more old school, right? Like, what if whenever we logged on to some equivalent of a Google Doc, and we just made quick notes of points as we go through it, and that would give a spine to the talk. And therefore, because I don't know that we ever need a full transcription, right? Sometimes the ideas are just kind of bouncing off or whatever. No, we don't want an opinionated transcription per se, but if we had the main points documented, and then an area where we TK come back to and actually transcribe it, that could be a lot more feasible.
Because often the interesting points in the sidebar are links, which, like as not, someone has put in after they've been speaking. So if you're following it later, and if there's a bit of a lag and stuff's going on, if you didn't know, you wouldn't necessarily know that, you know, URL XYZ actually was, say, 2 speakers ago.
I mean, there are some apps with the Zoom, but you know, the thing that we have discussed before, where we have an app running on our local thing, and if something's really interesting, hit the space bar or something, and all it does is synchronize with the YouTube upload, because the YouTube, you know, Zoom recordings does have time code in the lower right-hand corner, which is really good. So if they can somehow know each other, that this was recorded, actually, they don't even need to know each other, do they?
You know what, we could try. I've got I've paid for Roam, and I have an extra workspace that I could empty out, and we could, I think at that point I could just invite members, right? And anybody can put stuff into that Roam instance, and so we could record calls in there as we go. But then also, I believe they have a timestamp feature for YouTube videos.
Yeah.
So then we could go in and attach those notes to exactly where they appeared in the video. Right. And then also dump, and there's an Otter integration too, I believe, right? So we can just, but the mix between our own notes, Otter notes, and timestamps in YouTube. And then, of course, it could also be public facing.
Okay, so I think we need to get back on track about what we're going to do, because what we're talking about here is an actual discussion. It's important enough that we should probably set aside one session for how to deal with our own recorded record. What do you think?
I agree, but I think that this could play nicely, this approach, into the other topics about community building and the newsletter. If we had a centralized home for organic growth, you know, which we do very well in these calls, then that's already the home for it to be curated, cultivated into, you know, here's a starting place, here's a newsletter, or whatever.
It's a useful meta experiment too, because in a sense, in finding out whether the volume of stuff that's secreted is actually adding value in the way that we imagine. Because of course, you know, it is so insanely easy these days to create a vast amount of stuff. And you know, it should arguably be of most use to those who aren't in the room. And if it isn't, because there's too much stuff, then we perhaps need to rethink. Because otherwise, it's a useful. It's all good stuff, but it's arguably just an overhead.
The other advantage, and I hadn't even thought of this until just now, but like, you know, I've taken any sort of private stuff off of Roam, or work-related stuff off of Roam, because of that. But this domain is almost entirely open. There is no, you know, there might be passwords and stuff, but we could share that in email and not have to worry about that.
Okay, let's keep that in mind, because I think we have a few more specific things to do. As in, okay, so Ismail has asked me, he wanted me to take out the interviews that I've done that are in the book and release that as a separate volume. So in the beginning, I wasn't very happy about that, but then I thought, you know, we're never going to have one single repository of our stuff anyway. I'm just going to share screen now. I'm going to go to this Google Doc that we looked at together. So what I'm wondering about is, well, first of all, one little thing. I was thinking, if we do the book and journal and all that stuff, we should probably have one of the first pages. It says something like companion works. So in all the pieces we do as a community, on the first page, it says, by the way, this is part of this other stuff. So it doesn't become something for people to find, right?
Can you, what do you mean by that?
I mean,
Try to make it sorry.
you shouldn't see my bills there. That was funny. Right. So in the Future of Text book now, we have here, we have a forward by Ismail. He finally put it in, which is great. I have a little acknowledgements, and then I have a copyright and how to read this book. While I was out walking today, I thought maybe we should also have a section like that that says companion pieces. I'm sure we'll find a better term, but let's say for the Future of Text, it should say this, there's also a series of interviews, and here's a URL and a DOI for it. There's also the monthly journal and how to find it, and so on. That's all I mean. We should let people find the rest of what we're doing.
Out of interest, was Ismail's, my presumption is Ismail's just saying that the interviews are basically longer pieces and are a slightly, you know, well, they're in a sense a two-hander, and therefore different to the individual pieces in the book as such. Was that the distinction, or was there another reason he was suggesting?
I have no idea, but I did tell him that, well, okay, so one of our contributors, she emailed back saying the book is messy. And I think she mostly referred, she didn't use messy, but you know, there are issues. I think she probably mostly referred to the transcripts because the way they are right now is quite raw. So what I've decided to do is have the guy who, even though he's Brazilian, he's not native English, who's done the transcripts. He's a friend of Raphael's, and I really like his work. I think he's very reasonable. He will go back and do the basic editing of removing double answers. We often do that when we speak, not just but a little bit more copy editing, right? So the thinking then is to honor Ismail's suggestion, but to go on. So maybe we do a volume like that every 6 months, and we all try to figure out who should be interviewed. Currently, I have a series of okay questions, but I think us as a community, we can build questions that we're all really happy with. So it really does become a companion piece, and we go to non-text people. So we go to politicians. Tomorrow, I'm interviewing the former president of Croatia, for instance. You know, these are very random people. So that we get, but the fact that they're interested makes it interesting for us, right?
Yeah, I kind of love the splitting of those two concepts. There's obvious overlap, but it almost expands the surface area that we can reach with our community.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it goes to the way we're talking about dealing with our transcripts, because I think that is very important. I think maybe Friday, for instance, we should schedule only talking about how we record these meetings, because it's so difficult and it's so important. And it's not just a matter of having the money to do these transcripts. If it is also about, even if they were perfect, they would still be shit, right? They would have to be marked up somehow to find the useful bit and connect it, all that good stuff. And I think everybody in this room has an opinion on that.
Yeah. In the meantime, the recording of this, if you want to send it my way at the end of this call, I can run it through the Otter Pro and see what we can do on around a little bit of training.
We have the
oh yeah, I could use one of these. This would be,
yeah, the playlist is there.
Yeah.
Oh, 31
I'm recording this now on Otter just as to experiment, so I can throw the transcript in with no idea what kind of quality. I don't know if this is off topic or not, but there is maybe another question as to, I feel like the natural direction for interviews is that you get atomic and you know, hyper fidelity with the interviews, you know, every single thing they said. But there are other kinds of interviews where you compress the meaning and it's still what they said, but you take a little bit more liberty with it to make it more readable, more of a cohesive experience.
Yes. And I think that goes under that discussion I think we should have on Friday, because it relates to us now, how we communicate. And Brendan was a bit annoyed at me in the absolutely best possible way, saying, you know, I'm pushing about Mac native apps. You know, he doesn't use a Mac and a lot of people don't. So we really have to decide on the systems properly and not just, you know, in a closed world. My stuff is open, but it's still Macs, it's still closed, right? So when you're talking about atomic bits, I would be able to, I really want, when we're talking, you know, you said something, okay, I marked that right now, keyboard shortcut or whatever, that's relevant to this. You know, basically live tagging, why not, right? Because you're right, it has to be atomic units in the future. Nobody, hardly anybody, well, nobody outside of our community has time to go through and watch all our videos. So this is such a problem we all agree with.
Yeah, I was actually saying the opposite of atomic. I was citing or mentioning compression and creative compression to still get at the gist of what is being said, but creating a better reading experience. We talk about it on Friday.
Yeah, let's do that because it's way too important to have as a subtopic. And that really goes into the big thing. So we have the Future of Text annual book, easy. Future of Text interviews, separate book. And now some kind of a journal. You know, I really want to have that also as a PDF journal. And if it also links into Rome or bigger things, absolutely bloody fantastic. No question about that. I just don't want it to be lost in 20 years. I think that is so crucial because there's so many people saying so many things. So
this is your NLS type group journal in effect.
Yeah, but I see your hand, Peter, but just to try to empty my brain a little bit. So on the top left here, you see the months, and we do actually meet 4 times a month. So if we use our friends, and you know, we have some amazing friends, and I think we can do every 2 weeks, a hosted thing. And Adam sent in a list of topics rather than people. I think that's absolutely brilliant too, but we do have to do a bit of social media marketing to make it happen because in the before days, especially being in California, there was always this tug about, is it a machine software thing or is it a human thing? And it got so annoying. So I tried to split some dialogue into 2 and it just never worked. There will always be factions fighting for one thing because that's what they were interested in. But if we could manage to do this, have a really clear schedule and really stick to it, invite people, I think it would be fantastic. So I'm asking you guys, what do you prefer? 1 person a month, 2 people a month? And how often should we set topics? Any feelings? Okay, I'm sorry, because I kind of was rudely dismissing Peter. Can you think about that while we listen to Peter, please? Sorry, guys.
Okay, I was thinking that it might be valuable for us to take a look at literate programming and see if we could develop some sort of cross-platform literate programming tool that we could all be using when we're building our own separate experimental systems and test projects. And I'd say that that's certainly doable in the Node Electron ecosystem. And again, the projects themselves wouldn't have to be JavaScript based, but that's just the most feasible cross-platform technology that we could use to build a tool that we could then use to build experiments and other systems down the road. I found in my own work that literate programming is absolutely indispensable for me if I want to have any hope of figuring out what code that I wrote more than about 4 months in the past was doing and what I was thinking at the time that I was doing it. But the current tooling available, probably the best system at the moment is called NewWeb, and that's a C program that was written ages ago, and it has no kind of user interface, so it's totally unusable unless your main mode of operation is working at the command line in the shell.
Peter, can we have a full session on this?
Yeah, that would be a great dedicated session topic.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to just put that here.
Also, on an unrelated note, I've noticed a fair number of tools coming out lately purporting to help you sculpt stories in the fiction writing area. There's one called Dramatica. They have like a whole online book I just found that has an entire theory of the story. So that's completely separate from technology, but that's using the technology to create new works of fiction. And I think that would be another really good topic for us to have a look at.
Right, okay.
Okay, so my brain's now drained.
Okay, cool, thank you. When we look at the amount of people we have in the book, It's amazing. So that's our beginning network. Plus, it's also a good excuse to reach out. So should we try to have someone every 2 weeks, whether famous or not, to put it that way?
I would ask, what is this driving towards?
Right. So stepping back to help answer that question, the interviews book, I told Ismail that I don't have money to do that level of transcription and editing for 10 initial people. So he's getting me $2,000 to pay for that. So that's, as a separate specific piece, he is making that happen practically. What this is driving towards is my interpretation of what you're talking about, which Brendan is coming in a bit louder on, and that is, well, actually, also Adam. So Adam says, a magazine for professionals working with text. We have two things here, I think. One, live chat, and two, we have publications. I think that if we keep going where we are, up our games and being more organized and produce things in a very readable fashion, we are actually going towards being proper publishers. And I think that, I mean, right now I own a name and Adam has another name. We have to decide on IP. I'm happy for everything to be open and so on. But I think that we can build a proper community where we feel we have ownership. Ownership is a very important concept. And that we can invite people in. And like Alan, you and me talked about, they will feel ownership too, even if they're there just for session.
Mm-hmm.
They're not subsumed by our brand, but I could imagine we invite Mrs. Interesting. She hosts a day. We somehow transcribe it, note it, put it in our journal, just using that name loosely. And that person can then refer to that later. As in, I wrote this piece in X journal, and that will have value for them. It's not just kind of hidden away in a stream. It's not just a podcast that's one-off. People.
Okay, so if we take this angle of a magazine of people, perhaps professionals working with text, that's very interesting, and that I think that changes a lot of the conversation, right? Because first off, the first thing to do, are there other things that are like this out there, right? And what we find is that there are a lot of individual thinkers, and then there are a lot of sort of niche hubs, because this is what this sounds like, is a hub, right? So those hubs are obviously successful or whatever to their scope because there's a lot of interest around it, right? So that means PKM tools, right? Obsidian, Rome, etc. It means maybe Slack or Enterprise. So that would I think framing it as magazine for people working with text is really interesting, but then we'd want to unpack just what all of that means. Who is the audience that we're imagining for text for this, because there's the people that are interested in text academically, and then there's the people that are prisoners of text in a business sense, in an enterprise sense. And that, I think, would help. Where I bring it up now is I think that would help actually put structure around who to bring in where. What are our feedback loops? How do we define success in a particular talk or not? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think there's also interest in getting some of those presenters to be a counterpoint, because otherwise we can end up, we have a topic, we discuss it, and all the people that interested in the topic flock in briefly to discuss that and all push off again, because next week is, and the more interesting thing, it's a bit like the original, some of the earlier feature text presentations. You just sit through a day, and even if it's only just one of the presenters, you stand up and say, well, that's that. Yeah, I hadn't really, I hadn't thought about this thing, something that I know in this other context, and that's value.
Let me answer it in a different way. So I'm kind of reevaluating my life in a good way, and really trying to ask the basic questions. And if I was given, let's say, $1 million a year by Google to just do stuff because they think I'm so nice, What I would be doing is very similar to this. I would be investing in community and coding. We got to build stuff, no question, we have to try it. But when I say community, it really has to be very, very, very diverse. Otherwise, it's just rehashing the same shit. I know we all agree on that too. So when you're talking about identifying who this thing is for, I think the mast really needs to be text, but then there will be subtopics. And I think that, over time, if we make it accessible enough, not just a big heavy book a year, that people can come in and read it. We have to redefine writing too. I mean, I'm trying to finish my goddamn PhD thesis, and it's just a huge, thick document. It shouldn't be written like that. It should be much more hypertextual. We have to figure out a way to serve this up in more Twitter, TikTok, but also long form. We have to figure out those connections. That's why this has, it's not just a transcript. It's a huge discussion we need to have on Friday. How do we make the record digestible, right? I think it can go somewhere. I think we can do marketing. Let's be honest, that's what it is to enlarge the community, into academia, into the arts, into technology, especially different kinds of programming. Let's not forget programming is generally writing. We can learn a lot from different ways of doing that, like what Peter was talking about, no question. Object-oriented programming, great. What about object-oriented writing? What about reuse of code? All these brilliant things. You see, like Barbara Tversky has agreed to come and be a person for us. Oh, first of all, by the way, guys, our open office hours, I think we need to change the name. In the beginning, it was basically, for me to just talk to people generally about the book. It isn't about me. It is about the community. But it's still too much about coming into someone's office. Shouldn't we call it something like the Pirates of Silicon Valley or something? A bit more fun.
How about the foundation? Just because what you're working towards is simply storing knowledge for thousands of years.
That is kind of cool.
I think that's really cool, not only for that reason, but also having watched the foundation, you're all up to speed, right?
I have not seen the finale yet.
Okay, so basically in the last episode,
don't tell us anything.
We're gonna have to have a separate day to talk about that heaping pile of garbage, but no, I loved it.
There was something that came up quite early, and that is he wasn't really trying to curate knowledge, he was curating people.
Yeah.
Right, and that is what we're doing, because we are not intelligent enough to know what the knowledge is, right? Or wise enough. So all we have to do is, if someone's passionate, you're welcome. So yes, I think, what are we going to call it? Foundation meetings, foundation chats, foundation fireside, foundation what's?
Keep text in the mix in some way. It is the common thread in terms of your entire life, your purpose here.
I suggest we not decide on anything right now. You just floated the idea, so we've got time to, room to maneuver. I just thought the foundation was funny, but
that's what I would call it.
Foundation sounds like a contradiction in terms.
Yeah.
Which is also kind of cool.
That's fair.
When I met Doug and he asked me about my work after we talked about his amazing work, and I said, my job is just to try to make information and the users as liquid as possible, but not completely.
That'd be Silent Green, yeah, if you went the whole 9 yards.
Fungible foundations?
No. Okay, so we have okay, let's look at it this way. We have an annual symposium, because we've used that word.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the agora? No, not really. What is another word for meeting? That's kind of nice.
There was the there's the Sunday group. What do they call their group in here? Anyway, I think it's a bit of a distraction.
It is.
That we can take offline, because the names are just names, but
something network.
Nick, network improvement community. That's what Doug wanted.
Yeah, I think actually your passing comment about curating people, I think is actually incredibly true, because the interesting thing about the conversations I've been a part of is it's often just a thought in the passing, and it's not something I would necessarily go back to, but it's a sort of serendipitous comment. It's the immediate reflection on it, and it might be for only one person in the room that they take that out, but that's been useful. So that's why the people part is important. The words and the probably the most useful thing, funny enough, for the talks probably sometimes just the references we stick in the side, in terms of URLs, you can go find more about this stuff here. Because often, even when you see the words are just really, a sort of a capture of the mood in the room and what the person said. And if you really want to hear what they said, you need to go and listen to them rather than read what they said, I think. And so that, I think I'm saying that because I think that aspect is an important thing to hold on to.
Okay, so I think
as people are more interesting.
Right, no, Mark, brilliant. Peter?
Yes, I'd like to throw out another radical departure idea. Could we consider developing a course syllabus and textbook on the future of text? Something that could be used by a professor anywhere from just undergrad level up to grad school, depending upon how far into the references and advanced topics they wanted to go, that would cover all of the different things that we've been looking at and just provide them with an outline and organizational framework. So if they want to do the course, they could have a turnkey course falling out of the textbook. I've got a ton of typesetting design work done for my computer science for lawyers textbook project that's been sort of sitting on the back burner. So we could certainly bring some of that forward and retask it for a textbook oriented project, because a professor isn't going to just take a raw anthology like the future of text and try to spin a course out of it. But if there was actually an outline and some organizational structure, it's like, here are the topics, choose like a pie menu kind of a thing. You can pick topic A and B, skip C, it's not necessary. Some of the computer science textbooks did this very effectively, where they'd suggest alternate paths through the textbook depending upon what your emphasis was when you wanted to use their textbook for a course. So they'd say, if your course is oriented towards programming, start with chapters 1 and 2, skip chapters 3, do 5, 7's optional, definitely do 9, and then move on to Appendix A, if and only if your students have a strong math background.
Yeah.
So we could have something like that, and basically, again, lay out all the different areas of interest that we have, point people to the foundational readings in those areas that they wouldn't necessarily have encountered on their own.
I'm not sure about that, because teaching implies that we know. I think we can do something related, though. I think what we can do is invite students in, and if first of all, the first book we had students write for the future of text. We could invite, if someone comes in and they're a student, they can join the meetings, read the stuff, and let's see what happens, and then maybe even like have an interview with them or something. That will be their final piece of work. But I'm a bit wary of going towards what we're happening in the future, so we want to teach you rather than we're trying to figure it out ourselves.
But I'd like to riff off of that for a moment. Peter, I think that's a great prompt. And first off, I think this would speak to, if there is a core vision or something like that, it's the difference between preserving text for thousands of years. That's a totally different mission than trying to come up with all the ingredients and figure out the path forward for the future of text, which would include just what the hell is text, right? So, and that's I'll push that topic off, though there are plenty of thoughts on that. What I could see as being useful, really useful, is collections, right? For that may have the beginner in mind, but say, for instance, I would love to see a collection of the top level conflicts in this space, right? The trade-offs, the conflicts that have made this kind of an internal problem, right? creation versus management, right? And then some of the interviews and articles that sort of touch on that kind of conflict, right? The disruption faculty of technology and how that changes plans, right? You know, seeing like that, I think that could lead to sort of workbook stuff down the road, right? But in the interim, just having collections of rebundling, which hopefully that would almost, in a future of text, would almost happen dynamically.
Yeah, there's a seed of a really cool idea in there, Peter. Ellen, you'd mentioned in the past, like you weren't aware of Ted Nelson until like far along in your journey of looking into hypertext. And that seems like an effective way that we could help, you know, the future of individuals we're trying to enable, that we are curating along again.
1000%. Right. Like, yeah. Like even a pack, we could, the starter package could just be, hey, Web3 noob, you know, you're excited about Web3. Let's take a look back and see who else has tried to do similar things, because it does tie into not Ted Nelson, the logical positivists. It brings up a whole lot of problem spaces that are easy to gloss over or think that can be solved, and they're actually like way deeper. Anyway,
yeah, I mean, I would be very happy to support students coming in and doing exactly what you're saying, like their masters or whatever. And we help them go through this and they write a new thing. I would love to have under this banner someone's whatever work, and we say, you know, done with our blessing or whatever. They will still own it, but it will be a different way to go in. Even an undergraduate student doing something as boring as trying to do what you said, Alan, and failing, but at least saying, I've read all this stuff. I think so-and-so, and I think this connects to so-and-so. That would be great guides for other students to come in.
Yeah.
By the way, Brendan just used the word effective. You've all seen Oblivion, right?
no.
The film?
Are we an effective team, sir? Yes.
Oh, you have to see Oblivion. Just go see it. It's beautiful. The sci-fi is small, but it's so incredibly well made.
Is it with Tom Cruise?
Yeah.
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 And
He fits that role. I'm not going to bother whether he's interesting or not, but it fits the role. It's just the way Brendan said effective.
that used to be the start of my.
You know, are you an effective team? Sorry, guys.
Am I entering into my cruise here?
Yes.
That was the start of my supervision meetings with Les. It was always, are we still an effective team? Yes.
Really? Good luck with that.
I don't want to skip over your question from earlier, Frode, of and sorry, I'm jumping two hands, so I'll actually hold on this, but I do want to get back to your question of like the 1 to 2 interviews per month.
Yeah, shall we settle on that? I think we can do 2.
My gut tells me and I'm very open to discussion on this. My gut tells me that it's easier to align on a common cadence of the Gregorian calendar. So whether that's
what order into calendar?
The Gregorian calendar. So like just like our regular calendar. So if we're looking at this and we have it on a monthly basis, that is something that I am reminded of. Or on a weekly basis, I am reminded of that. Bi-weekly, I get in this like weird thing of like, shit, is that this week? Is that next week? So that's where my kind of intuition tells me to put a flag in on the
once a month is great for a lot of other reasons as well. First off, we're going from 0 to 1. We don't know how much effort goes into this. We may have 1 or 2 that occur and then realize, oh, this could be so much more if we set these things up ahead of time. And now suddenly, you know, we're doing the stagecraft that makes a more meaningful once a month, right? And I'd rather figure out the dynamics of that than, oh my God, that one's just over. Now we got to scramble to get this other one done, especially when we all have dynamic forces on our time.
Even if it's just kind of like an iteration that we try that out for the first few months of 2022.
Right.
Okay.
Off the ground.
Just because I'm difficult, I'm going to suggest the opposite. I'm going to suggest once a week then. Oops, that got.
And
Did someone delete? No, okay, sorry, just scrolled.
I have a third option.
Okay. Hang on, Adam. Let me just explain the once a week, because I think it. Actually, no, you go first, please. Sorry.
Mine is none at all.
I love you, Adam.
The third option could be a good group name.
The reason is that I think it's easy. It can become kind of a, not a cult thing, but that we worship famous people or famous people, and that we don't stay on topic. I think sometimes it's too much centered around people and not ideas. I would rather hear your and their opinion, of course, their opinions in a good discussion, maybe with the writing prompts. So I would argue on keeping the topics, and of course you could invite a famous or a good thinker on that topic, but I would rather see your 5 prompts or answers to the same topic, or to a specific prompt, and really to compare notes and think and let us think for ourselves.
Okay.
Because most famous people are already published. If I want to watch Barbara, I can do that because she has several high-quality lectures on YouTube. I can do that, but it's harder to come in and have a good discussion about a specific topic and really think for yourself, which is a transformative part.
Yeah, Mark, I see you, but just briefly, when I said every week, that was for this whole rhythm thing, but it was also considering that a normal future of text has about 20 up to 24 presentations. So that is actually exactly the same as if we have one every week. It's not, well, no, every 2 weeks, but it doesn't stretch that much. And the format really would be 5-minute introduction of slides or just talking, whatever, and then we go on. I do think it would make sense that we at least have because you have a ton of topics here. There's more than, it would be good if we have let's say, first Friday of every month is all about hypertext. No matter who we invite, we have to invite someone who speaks about hypertext, who is interested in that. Now, they don't have to be famous. Goodness gracious, can be one of us. Second Friday is anything to do with text that isn't expressly a font, such as diagrammatic text, etc. So we have the topics, but we invite people in as well. But I do agree with Brendan's original concern that it has to have a rhythm that actually fits people remembering. It can't just every other. I agree that would be a problem. Yeah, Mark.
Okay, I try and hold on straight, because the thing that made me sort of just put my hand up earlier, at the risk of, well, I'll circle back actually, because there are a couple of things on the most recent thing. Is that I think I'm with Adam in to an extent that the interest of the person presenting is their relationship to the topic, not the person. Because if I really want to see that person, I can go and do that. So the draw for those interested in the text is, have they got something interesting to say about what the text or the sub area of text? And I think that's if that's sort of made the framing of the invitation and how people come in, then I think that'll avoid part of the problem that Adam was alluding to. I do wonder if twice a month is too often. I mean, because we all have limited time, and keeping up the strike rate of people can be hard, because the list may run a bit thin at the end. But I'm certainly, I have no strong feelings, and I'd rather take Alan's point here, is I would go into it softly. I'd probably ramp up rather than ramp down, because I think that's easier. But the thing that made me stick my hand up was just going back to this point, following on from what Peter said and the riposte to it, is that I'm in the middle ground with, actually, I think the others here, that I think there's something really interesting in it. I think it's actually one of the most interesting things about it is that it is innately, certainly from the sort of academic type perspective, it's very cross-disciplinary. And that's something we don't get enough of. So being able to ground your topic or your area of interest in things that you just won't have come across because you don't happen to work in that field is tremendously powerful. Now, whether that goes into anything as formal as some kind of a syllabus, or it's just some kind of a referencing list. And the value, I think, is more than it's more than just the list of things. It's the sort of a little bit of gloss as to why.
Right.
Because, you know,
Yeah.
you can easily fall into things saying, you know, first the dinosaurs came and then there was Memex and then there was Ted. And that still doesn't really tell you, you know, that, and you know, and the odd counterpoint you might say of, you know, Ted, who was very much, you know, so out there doing the 60s, and Doug, who started with a very engineering background. And yet, you know, their two views came together. I mean, there's some really interesting parts of that you just don't get cold off the page.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that is important to emphasize is these people are invited in. It's not about them talking for an hour. It's for them to present something in 5 minutes, and then to have real chance to discuss things with them.
Mm.
So that really is key.
So the organic quality is what you, the sort of where you hope to get value.
Yes, it is. I mean, I'm very lucky because originally I was close to Doug, and because of Doug, I got Vint in my corner. You know, it must be nice to have Vint Cerf on my side. Sorry, that's Hamilton. But the thing is, you know, I'm a bit of a networker. I don't know why. And maybe it's I was born a teacher, but it's so important for me that the right people meet, because, like, when I worked in Silicon Valley, for crying out loud. And I just met the kind of designy, graphic, codey people that was in my community. I had to actually step up a level and say, let me call Doug Engelbart's office. And that's how I got to meet him.
Wow.
Right. A lot of people who are really amazing are very happy to discuss their work with other people.
That's a good
Right.
point.
So because of this pure piece of luck, we have this community and we have the support of a few famous people. I mean, Adam Chire is very happy to support us. So that helps with a certain bit of the people who want to ask questions. A lot of the things he did with Siri is completely different from what I thought before I got to know him. So this whole actually talking to people and not just listening to a presentation is kind of important. You know, and that's why just bringing them into this space. I mean, a weird experience is, you know, seeing Vint privately for a long time, and then he's in a room full of 1,000 people who desperately want to see him. That's because he cares about this topic. You know, I want, you know, anybody in that room of 1,000 people who genuinely want to join us in discussion, please do come. Anyone who wants to see Vint because they want to have seen the famous person, please fuck off. Right? That's really the filtering, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And I think a really useful thing that I sort of rather picked up from the Friday thing is I was speaking to someone after, and there was a sense of, you know, there are these people there, and I wonder if I should contact them. I said, well, no, this is the whole point. Because there are people who, not just through reasons of prestige, you think, oh, crikey, that's the person who did this. And they might actually know something. And I find by and large, you know, nearly everyone approached politely is generally helpful. And ironically, it's the busier people who are the most helpful. I mean, it's just the way of the world. But I'm absolutely with you on the networking. I mean, I can absolutely say that I have never, well, I suppose apart from passing my naval board, I've never got a job through an interview in my life. Not for want of trying, but actually all the things I've done have ended up because someone else said, you need to go speak to this guy.
Exactly.
And it's clicked, and that's not, and I don't mean in any sort of nepotistic sense or thing like that, but just say, no, actually you wouldn't know if you passed them, but this is the person who understands your problem.
So
and that's the kind of thing I think we can be fostering as well in the community.
So let's go tail back to how we're going to have this discussion. Are you guys okay with just jumping into a little bit of the record that I said we should wait with? I think now maybe we have to, because it is not just about these meetings. It's really about what else happens during that month as well. Let's just agree. We start with once a month. That's fine. You know, if it's such a stunning success, we can always add it. I completely agree with you. Let's not waste time on that. But then in between that, let's say someone watches the Barbara Tversky. I want them to have the means through which they can produce a document of sorts saying, I saw Barbara say this, link to where she said it, citation. I think so-and-so. It's so important to build that. And the web isn't strong enough. It isn't connected enough. Citations aren't good enough. And it's either read this whole damn book or look at this tweet. I think we're in a prime position to serve our needs, because I think our needs are important and representative of a larger group. to build a thing here.
So by record, you mean the transcript of the interviews?
I mean the transcript of the interview. I also mean the recorded dialogue. So like I could imagine. Oh my God, that's me doing all those beeps. It's Discord. Stop it. Okay, Discord is good. No, what I mean is, I think there's an incredible amount of value of having a screen that has beautiful type on it, just normal, beautiful type, to actually read it, proper layouts, like we're trying to do with our PDFs. And to, oh, hang on, I have to open the door, sorry.
All right, he's gone.
Let's decide. Open the Google Sheet.
We can all run around and smash things now.
Oh, Adam, I'm actually in quite a bit of agreement with your take. I'll go into it in a minute, and how it feeds into all of this. Go ahead, Frode.
I actually have to try to reset an Apple Watch.
Oh, okay.
So sorry, it's a friend needs to use it. His wife is not. She needs the thing.
Is there not an app for that?
It's so complicated. It's ridiculous. Just hang on a second.
It's gone now.
Yeah,
Very well, Alan.
Frode can see this in the recording, but I mean, in general, I'm a advocate of expend the least amount of energy as possible until you know it has an essential purpose, right? And so I'd want to know that interviews would lead toward a greater purpose. And I see where Frode's coming from in that I think it could get there, but I think it's important not to get caught up in the star attraction, and arguably even not to get caught up in just the topics, right? Because just saying hyperlinks as a topic isn't going to inspire a lot of people or imply a lot of context. And it's much harder to do the, hey, parallax the, take these three things, or take this one story, this, story that's packed with possible angles, and unpack it for us, right? Like that's a harder thing to do with a group of people, but arguably you get way more, you get the kind of information that you get from, say, a mentor a couple of years in, right? Where they have that real nugget that doesn't come out right at the beginning. I didn't explain that too well, but that's the, there's the Frode where I was taking advantage of your absence to say that in part, I very much actually agree with Adam that, I would first want to know that are interviews going to forward any goal? And I think you make a great point as to how it can, but I'd want to strengthen that point and understand that more. I also really think that, yeah, we shouldn't fall into the star power trap or the topic trap of just saying, here's this catchphrase, now speak on it, right? I think it's more, it's too easy to get pat answers and safe answers that way. But an organic conversation is where a lot of real value can come out. So all that to say, and this could also actually help with the topic that we were just on of the record. If we could unpack more of the purpose, vision, ambition of this, I think it would help every other action. So as an example, you say future of text, that can be taken any different, it could be the future of magazines, right? But the minute that you add Vent Surf in there, now it goes, oh, okay, wait a second. So this is kind of different. Is this like the future of, knowing Vent, does this mean like the future of stable systems? Is it the future of protocols? Are we trying to find an appropriate next schema? Okay, so now we've got more nuance into what this conversation is about, right? And that is, I think those are really great parts of it, because that opens the doors to the future of technology, the future of infrastructure. And so when I talk about the heart of it, that's what I mean. Sorry about that.
So I agree on every point. And actually, I'm just going to go into the hallway and drop off this watch in a second. But so here, I'm not changing the topic, but if I do Command Shift N in Reader now, it shows all named entities as according to the Apple API, right?
Mhm.
And that is useful to an extent. I've changed it so the headings are faded back and the bits are readable. It actually does kind of help go through it, but also we have this Command Shift D does the same thing, but it shows the defined concepts, the glossary terms. Right, so these are some interactions that I think are very important for us to properly start playing with. We could maybe have a community glossary, right, that we write together. We could even write it in a Google Docs or something. So it's not the same as a personal glossary, but when you go through these things, now you can instantly see that, you know, these are some of the topics that are being discussed here. Right, this is very
I think we need a community ontology.
Yeah,
Well,
I guess we do. Let me just drop this off. One second.
I actually found out that sort of chimes with something else I had in the back of my eye, but I was just to what Anders said, I thought it was an interesting point there, is that rather than take the topics, which can lead to a narrowing of debate, maybe we pick some of areas of conflict with a very small c, not sort of two ideas enter, one leaves, but take things that are difficulty. In other words, you start with a juxtaposition of two or more things that don't sit well together, but need to co-reside. And that's a problem space in which to talk, because that opens rather than closes things.
Yeah.
So
and there's usually stories that connect to it, right?
Yeah, well,
it's very entertaining to hear. Yeah,
and I think also for a lot of people, the backstory, without having to learn, you know, X begat Y begat Z, is just no, how we got here. Because so often the stories, I mean, you know, some of Vince's sort of backstories, how we got here is people were effectively just working within the constraints. They didn't have time to get fancy, you know. I mean, had limited time, limited space, limited means. I had to do something, and of course, with the benefit of hindsight, it seems like the wonderful idea that we now have. But again, surfacing some of those things allows one to look back and say, okay, well, maybe we can take a different fork out of the ideas, you know, further back, pull something useful forward, which we couldn't do then that perhaps we can do now. So that kind of thing can come to the fore.
Distilling that down, or maybe reducing it, but what I really like is topics that are conflicts, that are inherently pluralistic or dualistic, you know, as being a place, you know, to frame or to prepare the speaker, you know, hey, we're gonna this versus this, let's go.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think the thing we have to avoid is conflict, but you're absolutely right. But there are two things that just don't at the moment sit well together. That yes, you know, don't offer a common way. So that, in other words, there is a thing to be resolved. And I put in that way, then that allows one to spin out in all sorts of ways, or to approach it from all the various areas that impinge on it from a sort of textual perspective.
I'm going to have to bow out now for elder care transport.
Okay, Peter. Please watch the further on this, because I think we're building more and more towards what you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, yes, very good. Also, I forwarded an email from Fedrico Tomasetti, who's a domain-specific language engineer, who was asking in an email today about how he could interact with the research community and possibly reach out and collaborate with them. So I sent a copy of that to all of you because I didn't know whether he'd want it to appear in a potentially public chat transcript. So I just forwarded the note direct to all of you. So you can have a look at that in your inbox later on.
Thanks, Peter.
Bye-bye, guys. See you Friday.
Thanks. So
one other thing, sorry, to just throw in, so it's sort of in our minds before we go on. It's something I picked up from last week was I thought it quite interesting hearing David LeBeau's comments about how much he'd done in terms of actually doing some sort of a track through the corpus of stuff that's already in the future of text. And that's something I think we probably ought to look to try and leverage as a way of understanding what we already have in the hopper. And
Yes.
I mean, I leave the idea that I don't know how to go ahead on that, but it's something that, in essence, unseen by us, he's actually quietly put an awful lot of work. I mean, whether we agree with it or not, but the point is, somebody has actually been in some detail through the whole future of text and come up with some thematic angles, and that's something I think that's worth revisiting.
Sorry, guys, just 1 second.
That's interesting.
So,
Yeah, go ahead.
If we only could do one thing here, what would that be for you? Because we often talk about different things, building tools. We're talking about making some sort of history book of all the things that are forgotten in the archives. We were talking about helping students sometimes. We're also talking about inspiring, maybe building community, inspiring new people or other people to find out the beauty of text or what it could be. What would you like to do if we only could do one thing? Because it's easy to say I like that and I like that, but the question is always you can only do one thing at a time. So what is the best use of our time, or what is most important, and what should we really do? I think that should be a guiding thing, because it's so easy to say I like that, and I like all the topics and all the people, and I would watch every session here and everything and I would read the glossary, read the history, but still it will. Whatever we'll do will destroy all the other possibilities. So,
Yeah.
I hear what you're saying, Adam, but I'm going to have to bulldoze an idea anyway, because it's been in my head too much in this call. So the bit that I showed you of seeing the names and the defined concepts is what it is. But I could imagine, yes, I could imagine very easily that someone, okay, now I'm entirely in my world, just taking my hand up, right? So a person coming into the community and us, we download our previous PDFs, the book, the journal, whatever, read it. But while reading, we are creating our own definitions as we're learning this community. So this is exactly what I have in author and reader, but just trying to explain how conceptually it fits here, right? So you go through and you find the word DOI and you define that or whatever it might be. But the key thing is, because this is in the reader software, when you go through other documents in our community and you click this button, wherever that word is shown. So you can build a mental map of all of this just by when you're learning about typography, for instance, or whatever, and there are more terms and there are more relationships. So you build your own little words of interest, let's call it that. And that shows up when you open these documents. Now the stage, once you've got a good set of those, then you may want to publish it somehow, either as a Benever Bush trail or as a glossary or as something else. But you don't just throw tags out there. But I'm talking about building something new and web-based for this, where we can see how, other people's trails through the works, other people's highlights, something like that. I'm not saying we have to start building. I just wanted to get that off my mouth.
Well, I think the higher level of David's stuff is interesting. I mean, I definitely had a full start there, only because I didn't particularly get on with highlighting as a start point. So it was hard to see what was there. But listening to him describe the output of what he's done, the sort of tools and what comes from it swam into focus as much better. And I think it's very close to what you're talking about. And it's not about technology X or Y. It's just this abstraction process and the creation of connections and trails is actually, I think, potentially interesting, and interesting as discrete from the technology that achieves it. So we don't fall too much down a technology rabbit hole. Because I mean, nothing that's particularly being used is particularly proprietary. I mean, there's also effort and code, but generally there's a thematic idea behind it that I think is interesting and very germane to the general topic here.
Yeah, there's kind of two thoughts that surface for me here. One is a desire to have an interactive experience that we can play with that is built within this group. That's super neat. I love it. And that kind of also conflicts with the second point of what Raphael is building, or what Fabian and David are building in Napkin, and the people within our community that are building tools like this that we might be able to afford as a way to get this idea off the ground. So there's no formed thoughts around that, except like those two, points that are kind of debating each other. I very much like the idea of doing what you're intending, though, Frode. Like the idea of framing your own thoughts and being able to create a trail for someone else, even for yourself, is very useful. It's a great exercise in kind of incrementally formalizing your thoughts around a tough topic.
And doing it, certainly doing it in a way that, I mean, the thing is, there are lots of tools out there, and I think often at the moment we've become sort of slave to the user experience without meaning to. It
Right.
becomes all about, which box I'm typing it in, and actually often we're very much doing the same thing. I was really enjoyed, when I was looking at Fabian showing Napkin the other day, and I was immediately thinking of the visualization that Adam did, and we were talking about this thing about how you reduce the salience of certain objects so that you don't lose everything, but it's there. And again, that's exactly what you see being played out there. Okay, they're using a certain sort of distribution as to where they put things on the screen, but the same thing is going, their things are getting smaller, or they're being pushed outside of the screen. And it just reinforces the notion that it doesn't have to be done a particular way. And often the difficulty of even getting that far in terms of being able to see something working stops us getting to the underlying point of so the trails often never get built because the tool never gets quite finished. Alan.
A couple of thoughts on a ton of ideas that came through there. Starting with the idea of creating your own ontology or your trails. I love that. That's kind of what I've been wanting to build for a while, right? That articles would just be one canonical path or one person's opinion of a way to approach a domain or a point, and there are plenty of others. And the canonical path may be the easiest way of entry. That the group says, hey, this is a good evolution of facts and arguments, but you could still make your own. I think that there's always going to be a conflict, going back to the topic of conflicts, between the energy that it takes for a person to encode what are these different paths, and because there's a lot of decisions that you have to make, even at an atomic level, that there winds up being actually, even though it could be in a UI sense very easy to do, it's still from a cognitive sense incredibly burdensome, a lot of friction. So I think the reality is that there's always going to be a trade-off somewhere between hierarchy and flatness, between sort of guidance versus open-ended. Now, to go to Adam's point about what would be the one thing that I'd want to do, my answer would be like, thing number one, I would just selfishly, I want to be building a tool that can help me support my lifestyle so that I can spend more time building a tool, right? That addresses these, that is in this space, because I love this space, right? Secondarily, it would be to kind of uncover a paradigm shifting discovery that changes the way we think about all of this spread of surface problems that we have. There's a sense, I think, that we're always talking about this because it seems like if we could just tilt our mind 45 degrees, these things that all seem like complexities would fall into a new way of thinking, and it would be much easier, right? I don't know if that's there. I don't know if that's a possibility, but I'll give you one example. I was writing about this the other day. It was like, what if there is a different way? So right now, when we write, we have two options, basically, inline and outline, right? The stream and the graph, right? But just saying inline is writing, outline, as we all know from grade school, what if there was another way to do an outline that didn't have the constraints of an outline? Because so many problems that even get into our basic technology and our coding documentation stem from the structure of the outline itself. It becomes apparent when you try and write an outline form and you say, oh, this point that I'm making now is underneath these points, but it's actually about this thing up here. And there's no way for me to reach back to it, but I need it to be down here, right? And we have the same problem, I believe, that would show up in the document object model. And so we come up with shadow DOM and all these workarounds and hyperlinks. But what if there was something inherent in the outline itself that could change, a different version of it? That's the kind of thing that I would love to explore in a group like this, right? If there was something, well, then it could open up plenty of doors to other kinds of ways of linking information, right? Some of it does require hyperlinking, but it'd be wild if it could be done manually, written down. The one, yeah, there's more on that, but all that falls back into the record and the ways of managing the topics of the interviews. Just having single topics is the standard and tagging it that way. But for someone coming into a topic and saying, I wanted to know, what Tversky had to say about, where she said this thing, I think maybe framing it in the terms of like Mark was mentioning, things that don't sit well together. So it wasn't just that she was talking about hyperlinks. She was talking about hyperlinks versus, mobility, right? And that's not a complete idea. So I apologize, but I wanted to bring it up as to say, like, maybe there's a different way to think about navigation as not just being, here's the subject that was discussed at this time, but maybe more like, here's the thing that sits in between these two things.
It kind of gets at what Adam was talking about around prompts rather than topics. I don't have much more to add on top of that, but that's kind of the thinking that I have, is because most of the time there's a tug at the idea that is like, okay, if we were trying to create the semantic web, like what are the factors that are playing against us? What do we have to consider there? What has been tried? So yeah, I don't have much more to add on that, but that's noodling now.
So
it's interesting. Sorry, go ahead, Fred.
Oh, I wasn't muted. Good. No, I was just going to say what I honestly think we should do. I mean, Doug didn't have any competitors. He had to build everything from scratch, but he had one environment. I think what we should do is task ourselves over the next month to build one piece of software to do everything conceptually, right? So we pretend we have a large budget. We pretend we have no competitors. We don't care about any of that. We find some great software online. I'm sure somebody here knows much better web layout diagramming software that I know. And we just do it. We pretend that we have to do it, to save humanity, almost make it a game, even though I don't think it is a game. And once we have a workflow that allows for these things to be done, then we say, okay, it's done. Now let's break it down into APIs or whatever. I obviously will fight for Visual Meta to be part of it, but there are other APIs too. So we can then say, this is how we present it to the world. And you can try this, I can try this, different people can try implementing different pieces. But we pretend, at least, we're just going hardcore. I mean, when I look at the future of text, I often come back to the Battle of Stalingrad. Soldiers were sent into battle with no rifles. There were too many people, too few weapons. The lifespan was about 1 minute on average. Find a rifle, pick it up and shoot. Nobody at the Battle of Stalingrad said, should we take this hill or that hill? That's just stupid, right? We can't afford to think that like that anyway. We're all lefty hippies here to a certain extent, not in every area, but it tends to be so much kumbaya and so much going in depth and not making anything. So now that I made my stand on the hill, what do you think? Should we pretend we can, at least that we may learn something from the experience of designing?
I don't want to butt in. I'm sure there's a lot of thoughts here. We were just talking about another priority. So we have to have, by definition, one priority, but I think I could come to the table, I could present to you guys what I think the software would look like. And we could whiteboard it out and break it down. And even if we had a vaporware that allowed us to identify properties of what a good surface area would look like, you know, that'd be amazing. But that's
Well, Alan, you still owe me a gosh darn article. So why don't you make this your article?
I've got a lot on that. I can cut that section out and just make that the article.
Yeah, why not? Because we do have lots of priorities. We have social priorities, people priorities, all of that stuff. But maybe we make for us every Monday, let's say, is building our tool. That's all we talk about on Mondays. You know, Fridays, we do lots of going in depths and having fun and maybe having speakers. Don't forget, we're not having organized stuff until January. You know, we have a month and a half. I mean, imagine if
I'm all for that. Honestly, there's a version of your tool that I would love to see additions to that I'd like to hear where I'm wrong.
I think that's really, really interesting too, because I think your point was well made about, you know, and I don't think you were being trite when you mentioned vaporware, because sometimes, I mean, there, you know, as Frode well knows, that building it out to completion, you know, can suddenly get expensive in ways that one didn't envisage. And that doesn't argue for doing nothing. The really interesting thing is to sort of push through the idea enough to know whether it's actually worth doing. And you can't do that entirely by just thinking. You have to start, you know, it's surfacing the constraints you didn't know were there. It's part of it, I guess. Does that sort of ring true?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the legacy of Ted Nelson is going to be the problems he brought to the surface that we weren't even thinking along those lines. That's going to be way more of his legacy than Xanadu, my personal opinion.
He goes on and on now about the key thing being documents are a single column. They're not parallel documents. So he's really narrowed down so much. I find it really, really sad. There's so many thoughts he's had, so many intuitions, but all he wants now is 2 documents with a line between them. That's his whole entire thing. I wanted to interview him for, you know, the fact that he has all these Post-its, you know, to him, what is an atomic thought? How does he want the reader? It's just not there right now. Anyway, Ted, if you're watching, I love you, and you're just bigger than you realize.
I do have a variation of that idea that does fit right into visual meta. I would love to, maybe I'll sketch it up in Figma and show it off in one of these Monday meetings if we want to go that route.
Do we all feel that one of the weekly meetings for a while should just be, let's pretend we're going to build a thing?
Adam, I feel like you have thoughts on
this. I can mock up a few things. They will be hacky things, of course, but it's really useful to take a Figma or PowerPoint or a napkin sketch or just a few words and try to make it into something that moves, that you can play with for a moment, just to get a feel for it. And I've made a few things myself that I can show on the Mondays that we may. I've been hunted by the idea of diagrammatic text, that the text should take more, use position more. We're so locked into the single sequencing that, and the alternative has been more of a layout thing, that you lay out blocks, and I don't think that is an alternative. I think the sentences and the symbols themselves should be exploded more and take the form more closely to it, and not a graph, because these are lines of thought. These are arguments. It's not a flow chart either. So that is something I want to get down on the screen and discuss a bit more, and I think that would be a very useful thing.
I'd love to run an idea by you quickly, but I want to make sure Brendan. Hey, hello, sir.
Hey, I saw only now the email from Zoom saying you logged in a long time ago. And this meeting has ended, but as you can see, we're not very good with timekeeping. So glad you're here. Just to fill you in really briefly, we're talking a bit about how to keep the dialogue and the dialogue record going forward. And we've also decided that Mondays, we're going to pretend we have multi-millions and we have no competitors. We don't care about platform. We're going to design some vaporware that suits all our needs, just to make something concrete.
So,
Sounds
so on
terrific.
that, I'm pleased to meet you, by the way. Brandel, is that how?
That's right, yeah.
Okay, great. Nice to meet you. Adam, what you were saying, like one of the tools, so simple. All I want is an app where I can throw in an ebook or a PDF, and what it'll do, we'll take the PDF example, is it'll immediately take whatever's in there and just make it one column on the right or left-hand side, right? So now half of the page is blank. And as I read, I should be able to press down on a word and drag that word over into the empty side. So this is very much like what Frode's building, right? And now that part is connected, or maybe take a highlight, and I can then associate, and maybe even slide it over some more, but I can visually or spatially associate these little things that are triggering my brain together, and I can clump them around, and it gets more, there are more options there. But just even the simple fact of saying, I want to pull over, I don't understand. It feels so natural to say, here are the words. These are bits of UI that I should be able to manipulate how I want, right? And that map over on the other side can become a graph, but it could also be like, hey, it could be a one-off graph in the sense of I'm grabbing these three things and now I'm just packing them up and putting them aside. Now, as I'm going on, I'm grabbing these two things and saying, these are connected in a way, right? And so then I could have a meta map of these little one-off organic associations as I'm going across through the book, and then download, export the result, or whatever. But just that kind of way of active reading could go in a lot of different enhancements, but that's what I want. Yeah, I'll stop.
So Alan, Craig Cashman has, the reason my company is now called the Augmented Text Company is because it was called the Liquid Information Company. He started something called Liquid Text, and it's close enough in
Different
time.
than Liquid Text.
Hmm?
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it was close enough in time that neither one of us can, quote unquote, jokingly sue the other one. I think he's doing fantastic work. So Craig Cashman has the product Liquid Text on iPad, also Mac now, that does allow you to drag from a PDF to the side. I'm not a fan of his particular implementation, but I think you should definitely have a look because it is.
No, I've used it for years.
Oh, okay, fantastic.
I know exactly that, and the feeling that I'm going after is entirely different, right? Because grabbing something that is inside of a boundary of text, which is the PDF, versus grabbing something that has no boundaries, right? There's just this reader that I'm talking about strips the text from the PDF. You're no longer looking at the PDF, even though it may look identical. You're only seeing one column of it, and everything that you do feels like it's on the same piece of paper, right? And it's not about highlights and bubbles and different bits of UI. It's about I'm at the bare metal, the actual words, and I'm arranging them how I want. I can illustrate the difference better than in talk, but that's the gist. Yeah. Moving on.
Can you elaborate on the consequences of that difference? What it is that Liquid Text is doing that isn't that?
Yeah, sure. So it's actually a similar thing that pops up in Reader, where I have the PDF and it is presented in Liquid Text as the source of truth, right? And I can trim it down as I want. And it's great that I have access to that source of truth. But when I move the things over, they're in different bubbles, even if I can combine the bubbles. The gestalt of it is that I'm dealing with lots of little shapes all over the place, and I can no longer focus, right? So I want a chromeless version of something that's similar. And I think what that involves is perhaps having that source of truth pushed back a level, always there. You can always be comfortable that it will never be lost, but that the thing that you're manipulating is on top of it. It has replaced it, you know? And then we can have a more trim sense of information, right? Yeah, I think that comes close. That's not the complete answer because I had some more thoughts about it that go in different directions, but I can't recall them right now.
There's an interesting thing that I take in that. I mean, that I find that sort of similar exciting approach, and in terms of where we are, going back to our thing about constraints, is, you know, and I think of the PDF at hand is, at the moment we're basically putting everything firmly in that vice and glomming together the page numbers and everything, so that actually one thing we still make remarkably difficult really is to get that what you're referring to as the text minus we look at it by eye and we know which bits we mean by the text, but to a program that's got to go through, that's not necessarily, I'm sure, as clear.
Yeah, agreed.
So I note this simply because that means going forward, that means suggesting we need to rethink how we interleave the sort of page chrome and the actual text, the body text, if you will, of a document.
Well, remember that PDF text is awful.
Yeah,
really,
but
really
as we said, it's where we are. I mean,
no, hang on. I'm not. What I mean is, it's so awful and unstructured. Even Adobe had to release something called Liquid View using AI to put structure back into it. So I think we can partly cheat here with visual meta, obviously. However, for some reason, most documents in the world don't have visual meta. I don't understand why. But if we do the kind of thing you're talking about, Alan, just be aware that you will be dragging kind of horrible blobs. So I still think your interaction is absolutely worth following. But a question I have to what you're saying is that other space you drag to, is that connected to the document, or can you open another document and keep adding to your space of dragged objects?
So great question. And this is where, like, I would basically show you the interaction that I was thinking of, and then we tear it apart, right? So in my mind, I would say 3 documents, right? Like, I want the thing that I'm interacting with, I want to be one document, right? So here's the text, and then here's the associations that I've created, right? And that's also could be the place where I find links that, or I'm reading something and it reminds me of something else. I want to be able to drag that into the same sort of sandbox, right? Second document is the sandbox itself, all the relationships there, and maybe how that fits into my larger ontology. And then, of course, the third document is the source of truth, right? So I would start out with, why not have all of them available, right? But maybe there's more nuance to the question.
Okay, well, yeah. So the thing is, selecting stuff to drag actually takes a lot of work. It's really nice as a demo, but if you had another interaction like double click, keyboard shortcut, it's so much faster. But then you don't get to place exactly where you want. Direct manipulation has very important affordances, of course it does. But I'm just trying to think of, what is the point of what you're talking about? Is the end point to understand that document, or is it for you to gather materials and to understand something in general, or is it primarily in support of you authoring a new document based partly on some of these sources?
So here's the point, because there's more under the hood that I haven't discussed. The point that I haven't seen is a total unconventional, rude take on text documents. And that would be like I just bought an ebook. I loaded into this reader, and suddenly half of the available space to read is gone. That's insane. But that would be the wild take, that I have all this white space, like a Tufty sort of design, right? And I'm reading through, and now I find that I can actually drag and interact and do things. And now I'm suddenly experiencing, it's a new model for active reading, right? So the main gist of it was not so much all of the consequences that could fall out from that. It's how wild would it be to see such a bold move, right? That flies in the face of how we read PDFs and books.
But again, how is that different from liquid text?
Because in this case, I'd actually like to see a minimal version of liquid text, and with more constraints and less freedom. And I think it would be a better active reading experience.
Right.
So I'm not suggesting something totally different, but the way that the psychology behind user interfaces is such a wild thing. Little frictions can get in the way and completely stop a brilliant product from moving forward. And my hunch with liquid text is something like a Chromeless version, a more constrained version, would be a lot easier to use.
I definitely think this is part of what we're going to be spending our Mondays on.
There's an interesting thing. Listening to Frode saying, well, you know, there's a sort of cost to doing the drag and drop. An interesting thing there is well, the point is you want to extract something into the thinking space. And one thing I've found over the years working with sort of unconstrained map views that people use is overcoming their innate sense to want to make pretty pictures, despite that exactly being not what they want to do. So they're fighting something quite deep that says, you know, things need to be lined up, whatever. So to a certain extent, so one of the things about putting a drop, where you drag something, that's the easy bit, but where are you going to drop it? Well, it's easy with the first one, you just put it in the middle maybe, but after that, you're already fighting this sort of desire to make sense of it, when actually the whole point is you've very well described, you're actually trying to pull out stuff that you don't want to give form to, because you have an association, but it doesn't have a form yet. So
Right.
it is an unformed association. So
Yeah.
the only association is these things all belong together in some different way to everything else. Yeah, and that's an interesting sort of thing to try and capture.
I see what you're saying, Adam. Sorry, Mark. Adam's also in text here. What I'm talking about is if you select text in a word processor and you want to drag it somewhere else, so much faster to cut and paste, because you select it, and then once you select it, you have to hover for a second, because otherwise you deselect. Then you can drag it. So in theory, I agree. In Photoshop, I fly through that, doing all kinds of keywords and selections, because it doesn't have the same editability as text. And when you're in a PDF reader, when you have that kind of text, when it's meant to be read and not interacted with, you have funny things like line breaks and stuff. So it's because something else. So I'm completely agreeing that the importance of being able to use your hands, the haptics and all of that is good, but there are interesting things there that we would have to really, really look at fresh.
Yeah,
Brendan?
I played with the idea that when you click on something, that you select the whole sentence and not words or characters, because sentence is a more natural unit, I think. Of
Not
course,
in PDF. It doesn't exist in PDF.
No, but I use
Only
PDFs. Yeah. But if there is any place for machine learning, I'm not I think finding word boundaries or sentence boundaries is one thing, a place where it could do some good things. I'm not all too hyped about machine learning for everything, but finding word boundaries, and the browser is quite good at the built-in. There are APIs for finding sentence boundaries. That is quite okay. But I think as a unit, I think just clicking on a sentence and selecting it is very, very natural. And I did a prototype with that, where you could click on a sentence and press C and then jump to the margin as a free floating thing. And that was very quick, that interaction. You could still do a more manual select exactly what words you want, but it was lightning fast, and I really liked it.
Yeah, for web, yes, that's a good type of text for this, and that sounds like a very, very good interaction. But yeah, so Brendan, you're talking with the 10 to 30%. Is that the selecting text just while you're reading? Is that what you're referring to?
That was the sales pitch from the company that was trying to sell us on making use of this as a mechanism for understanding reading patterns and comprehension. Yeah, so it's actually a pretty widely used sort of thing, despite never really being discussed or taught. There are a number of people, I think David Kirsch and others have said, from a sort of an embodied cognition perspective, these are really good techniques for people to follow to improve sort of comprehension, but it's not really sort of a part of sort of people's common expectations, and something that most people, if they do discover it, do so organically. But yeah, like it means that there is a pretty good level of awareness within the browser of those events and actions, such that you can capture them and then use those to be interpreted for other purposes as well.
It's effectively like a silent highlight in a way.
Yeah.
I know you get a selection tailback if you actually do it. But
I did another small prototype where you actually used the down arrow to select sentence by sentence. You stepped on it, so you had a highlighter, the highlighted, just as some speed reading experts say that you should use maybe your finger, or maybe to kids, sometimes they use special tools for kids to stay on a sentence. But if you used your arrow keys to just highlight sentence by sentence, and it was very nice, and then you had the sentence highlighted, so you could immediately copy it to the side if you wanted. So I will show you that at some point, that prototype. I really like that kind of reading where you actually have to see the sentence as a whole, and you get active help over seeing the sentence. Of course, that destroys other patterns, ways of seeing, by seeing it sentence by sentence, but it's useful.
There's another version of the oh, sorry, someone else was, okay, well, another version of the spine idea, right? The half of it being empty was along those lines, where you could select, if it is just, one word or a whole phrase or whatever, you select it, but rather than dragging it over into a canvas, you just drag it just a little touch, because that activates the spine, the margin. And it basically says, do you want to drop this in the margin, which then becomes like a bookmark in time, like you're creating your own mini map, right? Which you could then drag over into the sandbox. It'll still show up as a spot on the margin, right? But that's saying that you want to actually do something with it. Otherwise, you're basically just saying, hey, here's a spot in time to come back to. Yeah.
And you could do a velocity thing where you throw it a little and you get it in the margin. You throw it further away to get it all the way to your bookmarks. Exactly. or
I love that.
Your thinking space. And,
exactly. There's so much there.
Yeah, there's kind of an interesting framing here with to come back to like the community discussion. These experiments, perhaps we could try to build around a constraint. So the constraint in this case would be the concept of active reading. And we want to create some functionality or some user experiences that try to improve that experience, like you guys have been talking. And that would be one of the themes for a given month, is experiments in active reading. And we could actually show kind of the artifacts of what we've created through that time. So I just wanted to round back to that idea, because I think that's a useful component for anyone who's looking for an entry point. It's not just the theory behind the work, it's the actual practice of what it may look like. And it sparks new iterations and thoughts for other people.
This conversation is so much more frustrating than what we've had for a long time. So my question for you guys then is, should we start thinking about, let's be exuberant, reinventing the web? Because as most of you know, maybe Brandel, you don't know, my personal animosity towards the web is that it dies, link rot. I absolutely hate that. And that's why I love PDFs. PDFs have all the other problems, but it doesn't have that. If there's a document on your hard drive or printed out, it exists. End of story. So all the interactions you're talking about that you started with, Adam, much better in a web browser. There's no question about that. But is there maybe a way we can just put our foot down and say, we're going to forget everything Tim ever did. We're going to make a new web, and that web will be robust, right? That's
So that could be immortal reading.
Yeah, but
Anyway.
that's half of it. The other half is we're then throwing away most of academia because their source material is PDF. But that's okay, maybe, because maybe we have some sort of translators, or we know you're just a poor little PDF, but you're allowed in the environment. However, if you are HTML or whatever, you will have these other brilliant, fantastic things. But so when I'm talking about reinventing the web, maybe everybody who uses a browser has a local server. It can't be that hard, right? Or maybe every month or whatever, it produces its own journal PDF, just automatically, just like a dump. And everybody who subscribes gets it. It's a backup. It has all the meta to enliven this thing. But maybe it is time to really focus on the web. What's the community feeling on that?
So, oh boy, yeah,
Okay, Alan, you go before the yellow hands.
All right, I'll just say what I've been talking about on the other, like I've been talking with some Twitter folks. Everyone's invited, obviously, and something we're loosely calling Xana 2, which is really around these topics. And so coming up with the frames for them, I've broken it down into one of the frames, simple frame is interface or infrastructure. And so maybe that could be the good swing. You know, we have interface exercises, right? That would be like active reading. And then we have what you just mentioned, which is more infrastructural explorations. I will cede my seat.
Mark, quickly, because you talked more
Yeah,
than
no, I was going to, well, I'll take Brandon. I was really just going to say, and lest it branch out, but at one point I did consider, is when we were talking about, you know, for instance, doing sentence selection and things, is that just to make the point that often if I'm doing that sort of selection, I'm not actually selecting any of the words in the sentence, and I'm not even really selecting the sentence. I'm selecting a place within the stream of narrative that is that work that has an echo for me to an association. And I'm not trying to be deliberately abstruse, but, you know, happy is the day where you can actually find a word that you can actually point to. This is, no, it really does anchor to this. The most interesting things I've found myself working on and never had the happy point of that thing. I mean, it's just another problem to deal with, but I'll stop at that. Brandel.
I was going to say I'm all in on the web. Whenever I work in other platforms, I always find that it's a breath of fresh air, including in high performance computer graphics, to return to the web just because of all of the benefits it affords. That said, I think that there's a big distinction between the technologies, the underpinning technologies of the web and the current state of it. And I agree that link rot is a terrible problem. I do think that HTML pages, and among other things, are incredibly well positioned to be locally cached and to be able to create stores of those things, and because of the extent to which data storage at this point is now too cheap to matter, so that people will be able to kind of record and encode persistent copies of the things that they navigate through, and have that as a personal storage kind of system. I'm not sure what Tim Berners-Lee's concepts of solid are. I haven't listened to them a few times and still don't quite get what he means, but I think that there could be quite an interesting sort of consequence of actually encoding and recording a much richer and inclusive form of browser history, effectively, of the entire contents of a person's given sort of browser experience. To the end of experimentation with the sort of deep reading, one of the things that I'm spending this week doing is I just found the text of Marshall McLuhan's Understanding Media, and because of the way that it has very like dense sentences, I'm going to build a VR-based reader that has the thing sort of the paragraph maybe 6-10 feet wide, and then you just sort of sit and pull things out and look at them paragraph by paragraph, to be able to kind of meditate over them rather than the kind of the rating systems that a lot of people have, which are sort of either prioritized for speed or cross linkage, but just as a sort of a reflective reader. And so I definitely love the idea of experiments and themes and things. And by way of example, that's what I'll be playing with, and hopefully we'll be able to
Love to see that.
give you something to see it by Friday.
Wow.
That would be very
That's
good.
awesome.
So guys, just in terms of, I mean, Brendel, you have a pretty good understanding of how browsers work, I understand. Not that the rest of you don't, but let's say I am all now pretending we have millions and lots of time and everything. To provide a plugin for initially Safari, but hopefully other browsers as well, that does the local server and the caching, and that is robust, as long as the user gives permission. Is that a mammoth task, or is that something that is the thing that should happen now?
It's been tried before.
It has been tried, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I know there's lots of permissions and all of that stuff, and there's very good reasons for that. But
I actually, yeah, and I think MIM is trying it again. MIM is a new tool, I believe, that is sort of a locally based. Well, no, it goes to a server ultimately because you pay for it, but it monitors everything that you interact with. Oh, it's snowing, and gives you access to it, right, via a single search. I could have that misremembered, but
I'm just
so
looking.
you're asking, is it possible, or what's preventing it? I think the thing that prevents it is the same thing that prevents any kind of last mile problem, that it does some things really well, and then, but because it can't do everything, it can't capture everything, it falls into that place of uncertainty, back to the Gestalt UI sort of thing. And it's just that slight bit of friction that prevents it from ever being truly and fully adopted. So you'd have to have permission on the participants, the distributors of media, to agree to this routine, or it becomes a pointless exercise, even in the form of like, oh, there's this article I saw online that was so great, I got it on my phone, I want to look at it and add it to my local thing, but there's a paywall, right? So that's the one kind of friction. That was a loose answer, but I think you get the forces that I'm referring to.
Yeah, Brendan just put a link in the chat with some really brilliant examples. Brett Victor is of course on there, and a few other good stuff. It's just, you know, in term, and it does mention Doug. I mean, for Doug, he had a journal. I'm sure at least half of you know how his journal worked. It was really simple. When you're ready, you submit your article to the journal. That's it. If you want to make a change, you submit version 2. It makes version 2 out of it. That's it. It has the simplest versioning ever, but it was very, very robust. Right. So maybe if we think of doing some amazing web stuff, we have just a component that when someone feels we're at a point of this is cool, or even on a monthly, weekly basis, it just publishes to a public domain something. Right? Maybe it even emails people the thing. I know I'm being a bit of a stick in the mud, but there's been so much amazing stuff on the web, and then it dies. You know, Flash died. All of these things died. Brandel, I even went to your website and had a look at your really cool timeline, and then there was some notice about that particular type of 3D is no longer really supported. You know.
Oh, that's actually something I need to talk to the people who build that library. What that means is that your device doesn't support it. It is supported. It's that that unless you were looking at my zetronuk.com, yeah. But the timeline thing that is supported. I just made sure that it worked with hands in VR yesterday. But what it means is that your browser doesn't support it. And you'd need to look at it on a device that does. I want to change the language so that people are then inspired to go find one that does. But yes, yeah.
Okay, because no, it's just because you really know this stuff. But we get to this. if we have some way that the record is put in some safe place to be read in 500 years minimum, I'm happy to dive into anything. But I don't want to do more toys. I mean, there's been so many cool things on the web that we can spend half an hour mentioning them. But unless someone is paying for a server and paying for a connection and the technology upkeep, it's gone. It scares me. You know, I'm old enough now to care about that kind of timeline. So that's why I'm wondering, I would be extremely happy to abandon, you know, obviously I'll keep my business with, you know, reader and author, but to really put a focus into how we can collaborate on the web. But do you guys have amazing ideas for how to make it robust?
Yeah,
One thing that I'm obviously biased toward is thinking about what Apple can do toward that sort of thing, and the emergence of Apple Private Relay as a service that people can pay for, I think is quite heartening in that there is appetite for recognizing the ways in which a company with so much vertical integration, shall we say, is able to make interventions on the way that people interact with the web. And same with login with Apple as well. So it's a possibility that you could imagine this through the scope of one of the big companies like Apple or Microsoft actually taking it up as a goal and integrating it tightly with those services. And you wouldn't necessarily even need to, from an imaginative perspective, hammer out all of the details, but just start from that point and then say, well, then what would be the user experience of it? What would be the how-to document about how to set it up and what you would expect from it as a sort of an exercise in design fiction.
design fiction, love that. And great point, Randall. Apple, just in the last year, seems to have had an incredible course correct just based on their last offerings in their OSs. And it's really exciting that they almost seem to be swinging back to kind of a semantic web interest, or just adding tags to notes and reminders and things like that. And the relay, it's nice to see. To Frode, what your prompt was, the closest thing I could see to that is just sort of the opposite of progressive enhancement, which would maybe be progressive decomposition, where you recognize that there's always going to be now, and until there's an apocalyptic event, there's going to be more interoperability or more dependencies, to put that another way. Things are going to have to rely on every other part working well, which will, on the plus side, lead to greater interactions and perhaps new kinds of thoughts that not even the greatest philosophers could have thought. But then maybe what we'd have to get in the practice of is, once this thing has happened, how could it be compressed or decomposed into, the animated GIF form, the text form, the PDF form, the website form, PowerPoint form.
Graceful something or other. Yeah, I mean,
just record your screen all the time, Frode. Then you get all the articles and everything.
I am considering that, but I do honestly think that visual meta can help in part of this, for one aspect, but also the other aspect is the notion of being done. I remember when I was in art school, actually no, high school, with my art teacher, and there was an exhibition and I had my work on the table. And then I said, no, actually, I want to do blah, on the corners. And she said, at some point, you have to accept it's done. And it was such an obvious thing to say, because, as an artist, I was all over the place. But also in this work, at some point, there are points in time where either something is done or a project is done, or the month is over or the year is over. So to have a data dump to visual meta or something like it, where, it can be, look, let's put it this way. If it's 1,000 pages of just data, nothing wrong with that. We have terabyte videos these days. As long as it's readable, this item's position on the screen at 3 o'clock today was XY. Whatever it is, as long as it's some competent normal human can go through it later and then, aha, okay, I know what this is. fine, let's do it on the web, but we've got to save it somehow every once in a while.
Because also, I was thinking your comment about, visual meta helping in a way. I mean, arguably one of its real helps is to just add to an incitement. Fine, it doesn't do X, it doesn't do Y. We'll go and make one that does. Because the good thing is, it's now crept out in, as of this summer into the first published documents in ACM hypertext and things, and hopefully more to follow. And the more it's around, the more people can't ignore it by saying, okay, it's fixing a problem we know there is, and we've been trying our best to avoid talking about it for a long time. And so I think that's good. But
well, it's nice to hear, Mark. But I obviously don't want to just bulldoze on that, because that's kind of like my little religion. However, I would be happy to continue, let's say, Monday development days with the idea that we switch to web for a while, but we have the understanding that at some point we're going to think about how to do safe data storage based on what we're doing on the web. That's enough for me.
Well, I see the visual meta as actually the essential interlock to finally explore better active reading experiences with PDF, and it allows that kind of, and maybe we'll go into this more on Monday, but there's a way I see of an interface component attached to visual meta that allows you to annotate, notate, connect, whatever, while you're within the document part, not in the glossary part, but you could feel confident that it'll get compiled and organized over into the glossary. So you still have the instructions to pack with it.
Yeah, okay. So now you're getting the heat up again, even though it's 2 hours and I really have to feed the family. But if we have properly authored visual meta documents, like I can from author, and it's easy for anyone else. First of all, you have the basic structure. Headings are known. This is really, really important stuff. And it's really basic, right? Because in other types, we can have that. But the things you're talking about, Alan, the active reading experiences, the author can set up hints, the author can annotate, the author can do layers. For instance, there's a view in my author software where you press Command-Shift-B and it shows only headings and any bold text. It fades out the non-bold text to make it more skimmable. I made that for me as a writer. But when I showed it to Vint, he said, oh, I would like to be able to, when I'm reading your final PDF, to press a button to see what you chose to highlight.
Yeah.
Right. And it could also do a bit like the Brendan sent a link. There's a beautiful bit of text just kind of going like this. Visual meta should be able to encode that, these are the different views of the document. This is where I think it's really important. And also have different ways to show citations. Even Ted Nelson lines coming out should be encodable in a point that the viewer should be able to show it, right?
Totally. Yeah. I think a lot of the ideas that we would discuss could find their home in reader or author.
I mean, we could approach this question from the other angle then. We could approach, again, neutral, how we make it, hopefully probably on the web. How can we make, let's call it a word processor, people understand, but really, how can we make an authoring environment whereby we produce the most richly readable documents possible in a reader that we own, and build it on the web or whatever? That could be an interesting question. Because if we can really demonstrate the utility of this, it may take off. We're not slave to the old PDFs.
There needs to be some room for philosophy in there, because I think what we'll find is that there is no one interface that can handle that, right? Like what I would personally, when I put my work hat on, what I actually need as a reading environment is something that can take everything that's occurred in Slack over the last 2 years and put it in some form that I can start to manage, cultivate, work through it, right? That's an entirely different origin point than we're starting from a PDF or an ebook.
Well, I'm talking about just starting fresh, but being able to pull things in. But nothing wrong with building a component from Slack that does take everything out with whatever meta was there. And then in the authoring environment, you can quickly go get rid of a lot of stuff. Because as Mark Anderson found when working for the government here, doing reports and stuff, they don't seem to understand anything other than plain typing in a Google Doc and sharing it.
The metadata is the file name. It's that scary.
So I think we have a great start. I think we can. We'll meet on Friday. but we'll try to dedicate a few Mondays to not talking about the infrastructure, not talking about the saving stuff, just talking about the interactions, right? Because otherwise we will just keep looping. Does that make sense?
Love it.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So see you all on Friday.
Okay.
Good.
That is good. And Brandel, welcome.
Yeah.
I'm glad you. I'm glad I saw the email
Yeah.
finally and told you the actual times. So 3 to 5, usually, often 3 to 6. But anyway, see you all later. Have a good week. Bye, guys.
Here, guys.
Bye.
Yes. Oh, Mark, where
Yeah.
can I find information about you? Your name is hard to search.
Yeah, in terms of, sorry, I mean, I've just finished doing a PhD at Southampton, and I've mainly been working in knowledge systems, really, but not. I'm not from the background. I was originally naval signals officer, which is what led me into systems, but I did a startup with kids software, and then I was doing basically working as an information emergency plumber in a sense, early days of photo metadata and stuff. So I spent a lot of time breaking other people's software. So I know enough to be dangerous about construction and to respect it as a skill. Can't do it myself. And I'm at the moment just sort of, resting, waiting. I mean, I'd really like to actually dig into the stuff I discovered when I was working up in government, and just, the digital dark age we're heading for is truly scary.
Yes.
But I don't, otherwise I don't, I mean, I have a sort of, you probably rummage up, there's a personal consulting company that hasn't done anything for ages. But I nearly everything, I fingers in many pies, none of it gainfully employed. Well, doing good stuff, but not in any formal sense. So a lot of stuff I've been doing recently has just been doing things like making clean data sets so that we can actually do stuff with it. Because a number of the things that we talk about creating, the next thing is, well, what do we have? So for instance, the ACM hypertext citation data set I made was simply because I wanted to try and make citation network graphs, and I couldn't even find a data set for it.
Yes.
So that I mean, it's sort of odd niche skill set I have, which a lot of it's to do with, in a sense, is to do with understanding data, not so much from the code sense, but from the informed user sense. I just wanted to do this, but I understand there are limits. There are lines within which I need to color, but are the lines in the right place? Is, I guess, sort of
I have to close the room, I'm afraid.
Okay.
But,
No, thank you.
My initials are MWRA. MWRA@mac.com will find me, and for any questions you have, I'd be very happy to answer.
Thank you, Frode. I'd been looking everybody else up, and I hadn't come up with anything there, so I appreciate it for the information trail.
I'm
yeah,
too
he's straight out of the
stealth, I'm
Matrix.
sorry.
Mr. Anderson from the Matrix. That's who he really is.
Indeed.
See you later. Bye.
That's right. Thank you, Frode.